Hi, I'm Emma Hayes, 34, and I built a multi-million-dollar tech company from the ground up in Boston. Growing up, I always felt overshadowed by my sister, Julie. My parents made it clear she was their favorite, but I never imagined how far their favoritism would go until that certified letter arrived. The envelope held more than just words. It was the ultimate betrayal, leading to a legal battle I never saw coming. Sometimes, the people who should love you unconditionally end up trying to take everything you've built. Before I dive into how my own parents tried to claim what I worked for, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt betrayed by those closest to you. I grew up in a quiet middle-class neighborhood in Hartford, Connecticut. Our house was pretty typical, a modest 3-bedroom colonial with faded blue shutters and a small backyard where Dad tried to grow tomatoes every summer. My parents, Martha and Richard Hayes, were ordinary folks. Mom was a receptionist at a dental office, and Dad was a sales manager at a local furniture store. We were comfortable, but never rich. From my earliest memories, I understood my place in the family. Julie, my sister, 5 years younger, was the golden child, the favorite, the special one. I was an afterthought. When Julie started school, Mom and Dad bought her a whole new wardrobe, pretty dresses with matching hair accessories, shiny new shoes, and a pink backpack with her name embroidered on it. For my first day of kindergarten, I got handmade from our cousin, Melissa. I still remember the faded purple jumper with a small tear Mom had hastily sewn up the night before. "We need to be practical, Emma," Mom would say whenever I asked why Julie got new things. "Besides, Julie is more particular about her clothes." This pattern continued throughout our childhood. When I made the honor roll in 6th grade, Dad just nodded and said, "Good job," before going back to his newspaper. When Julie brought home an A in math the following year, they took her out for ice cream to celebrate her academic breakthrough. I played softball in middle school and made it to the regional championships, but neither of my parents attended a single game that season, claiming they were too busy with work. Yet, they never missed one of Julie's ballet recitals, even when Dad had to reschedule important client meetings. Christmas and birthdays were perhaps the clearest examples of their favoritism. On my 10th birthday, I received a $20 gift card to the local bookstore and a cake Mom had quickly picked up from the grocery store. For Julie's 10th birthday, they threw her a princess-themed party with professional decorations, hired a face painter, and gave her the latest gaming console she'd been begging for. I pretended not to care, but I locked myself in the bathroom and cried that night. The only person who ever made me feel valued was my grandmother, Grace. Mom's mother lived about 30 minutes away in a small cottage, filled with antique furniture and the smell of fresh-baked cookies. I spent as many weekends there as my parents would allow, which was often, since it meant one less child for them to worry about. Grandma Grace was different. She noticed me, she listened. She celebrated my achievements, no matter how small. "You've got a sharp mind, Emma," she'd tell me while we played cards at her kitchen table, "and determination. Those two things will take you far in life if you use them right." Unlike my parents, Grandma Grace had built something of her own. She'd owned a small but successful bakery in town until she retired. She taught me about business, and standing up for myself. "Never wait for someone to give you permission to succeed," she told me once. "Some people will never want to see you shine because your light makes them face their own darkness." I didn't understand then that she was talking about my mother. By high school, I'd accepted my place in the family and channeled all my energy into creating my own path. I joined every business-related club, maintained a perfect GPA, and worked part-time at the local tech repair shop. My goal was clear: earn a scholarship to a good business school and never look back, and I did it. I graduated valedictorian and received a partial scholarship to Boston University's business program. My parents attended my graduation but left early to take Julie to her friend's Sweet 16 party. I pretended not to notice. During my sophomore year of college, Grandma Grace passed away unexpectedly from a stroke. I was devastated. She was the one person who had always believed in me, and suddenly she was gone. At the funeral, Mom seemed more concerned with the arrangements than with grieving, while Julie cried dramatically in the front row. Despite having visited Grandma Grace only a handful of times in the past few years. 2 weeks after the funeral, I received a call from Grandma's lawyer. She had left me $15,000 and her collection of antique jewelry. She was very specific that these items were to go to you, and you alone. the lawyer explained. When my parents found out, they were furious. I'm her daughter. I should have received something. Mom snapped when I called to tell her about the inheritance. You could at least share some of it with Julie, Dad added. She's having a hard time processing your grandmother's death. I refused. For once, someone had chosen me first, and I wasn't going to give that up, even in death. During those college years, I distanced myself from my family. I called on holidays and visited once a semester. But otherwise, I built my own life in Boston. I made friends who appreciated me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. My roommate, Alyssa, became the sister I wished I'd had. We stayed up late talking about our dreams and supported each other through exam stress and breakups. I also met Nathan during my junior year. He was studying computer science and introduced me to the world of tech startups. For the first time, I had people in my life who saw potential in me, who encouraged my ambitions rather than dismissing them. It was like finally being able to breathe after years of having someone stand on my chest. After graduation, I took a job at a small tech company in downtown Boston. The pay was modest, barely enough to afford the tiny studio apartment I rented in a less than desirable neighborhood. My parents seemed pleased I had settled into a stable job, though they never asked for details about what I actually did. At least you can pay your bills, Mom said during one of our infrequent phone calls. That's all most people can hope for. But I wanted more than just paying bills. I had ideas, big ones. During my time at the tech company, I identified a gap in the market for specialized software that could help small businesses manage their customer relationships without the expense of enterprise-level systems. I spent nights and weekends developing a prototype using the programming skills Nathan had taught me in college. I decided to take a risk and use Grandma Grace's inheritance as seed money. The $15,000 wasn't much in the business world, but it was enough to register my company, secure, connect, and build the first version of my platform. Those early days were brutal. I worked my day job from 9 to 5, came home to my studio apartment, ate whatever was quick and cheap, and then coded until 2 or 3 in the morning. I survived on coffee and determination. My social life dwindled to almost nothing. Alyssa would occasionally drag me out for dinner, concerned that I was working myself to death. Nathan and I had broken up amicably after graduation when he moved to Seattle for a job with a major tech company. But we remained friends, and he provided technical advice when I got stuck. The first launch of my software was a disaster. The system crashed within hours, and the few customers who had taken a chance on me were furious. I spent a weekend fixing bugs, not sleeping for nearly 48 hours straight. I cried on my bathroom floor at 4 in the morning, wondering if I had made a terrible mistake. Maybe Mom and Dad were right, I whispered to myself in the darkness. Maybe I'm not special. Maybe I should just be content with an ordinary life. But then, I remembered Grandma Grace's words about determination. I got up off the floor, washed my face, and went back to work. The turning point came when I attended a local tech networking event and met Diane Reynolds, a veteran in the industry who had sold her first company for millions. Something about my pitch caught her attention, and she agreed to meet for coffee. Your product has potential, she told me bluntly, but your business model needs work. You're thinking too small. Diane became my mentor, helping me refine my strategy and introducing me to potential clients. With her guidance, I secured my first major client, a regional chain of 30 fitness centers that needed exactly what my software offered. That first big check allowed me to quit my day job and focus entirely on Secure Connect. I rented a small office space and hired 2 employees, both recent graduates with technical skills and enthusiasm. We worked long hours, but celebrated every small victory with cheap champagne and takeout food. As the business grew, I tried once again to connect with my family. I called more frequently, sent gifts for birthdays and holidays, and even flew home for Thanksgiving. I wanted them to see that I was building something meaningful, that I was succeeding on my own terms. But my parents remained unimpressed. When I tried to explain my business over Thanksgiving dinner, Dad interrupted. That internet stuff is just a phase, he said, waving his fork dismissively. These startups come and go. You should consider getting a real job with a pension before you waste too many years. Julie, who had dropped out of college and was working part-time at a clothing store while finding herself, smirked across the table. Not everyone wants to be a workaholic with no personal life, Emma, she said sweetly. I stopped trying to share my professional life with them after that. When Julie got engaged to Brian, a real estate agent she had known for only 6 months, my parents threw an elaborate engagement party and called me daily with updates about wedding plans. The wedding itself was lavish, with my parents spending money I never knew they had on a country club venue, top-shelf open bar, and designer dress for the bride. At the reception, I sat at a table with distant cousins while Julie and Brian's friends occupied the tables closest to the wedding party. Mom stopped by briefly to ask if I was enjoying myself, then rushed off to help Julie bustle her dress for the first dance. 1 month after Julie's wedding, Secure Connect won a prestigious industry award for innovation. The recognition led to a feature in a national tech magazine which mentioned my age and background. Suddenly, my phone was ringing with calls from my parents. "We saw your picture in that magazine," Mom said, an unusual note of excitement in her voice. Everyone at my office was so impressed. I told them all about how we encouraged her interest in computers from an early age. It was a complete fabrication, but I let it slide. Over the next few months, my parents showed more interest in my life than they had in years. They called regularly and even suggested visiting me in Boston. During these conversations, they would casually mention financial struggles. Dad's commission structure had changed at work. The roof needed replacing. Julie and Brian were having trouble qualifying for a mortgage on their dream home. The hints were obvious, but I pretended not to notice. Part of me was hurt that their renewed interest coincided with my financial success. Another part, a small wounded child part, was still desperate for their approval and wondered if I should help them despite everything. Instead, I channeled my energy into growing my company and building my own life. I bought a beautiful condo in a historic brownstone, my first real home that felt like mine. I hosted a housewarming party with friends who had supported me through the lean years. Neither of my parents attended, claiming the drive was too long, though they had managed to visit Boston twice that year for shopping trips with Julie. As I arranged my grandmother's antique clock on my new mantelpiece, I realized something important. I had built this life without their support or approval, and it was a good life, one that made me proud. Maybe that was enough. My 34th birthday fell on a perfect autumn Saturday. I had planned a day of simple pleasures: a morning run along the Charles River, brunch with Alyssa and a few close friends, and dinner at my favorite restaurant. The weather cooperated with clear skies and that crisp October air that makes New England famous. I wasn't expecting gifts, so when Alyssa handed me a small, beautifully wrapped package, I was touched. "It's nothing fancy," she said as I carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a small pendant. "Read the inscription," she urged. In tiny letters, it said, "She believed she could, so she did." I hugged her tightly, fighting back tears. It was exactly the kind of thoughtful gift my mother had never given me. When I returned home that evening, pleasantly tired and slightly wine-flushed, I noticed a certified letter in my mail pile. The return address was from Connecticut, my parents' address. My first thought was that perhaps they had remembered my birthday after all. I signed for it, expecting a card. Inside was a single page of formal stationery, my mother's preferred paper for important communications. I still remember every word. "Dear Emma, your father and I have decided to update our will. After careful consideration, we've determined that everything will go to Julie. She has a growing family to support and frankly needs the assistance more than you do. You've been fortunate in your business ventures, though we both know luck and help from others played significant roles in whatever success you've achieved. We're informing you now to avoid any unpleasantness later. There's no need to respond to this letter. Regards, Martha Hayes." No happy birthday, no love, Mom. Just regards, Martha Hayes, as if I were a business acquaintance rather than her daughter. I read the letter 3 times, unable to process what I was seeing. My hands shook so badly that the paper made a rattling sound in the quiet of my apartment. My chest felt tight, and I had to sit down as a wave of dizziness washed over me. The clinical tone, the dismissal of my hard work as luck, the formal notification that I was officially and legally worth less than my sister in their eyes. It was like being stabbed and having the knife twisted slowly. I called Alyssa immediately, my voice breaking as I tried to explain what had happened. "They can do whatever they want with their money," I told her through tears. "But to send this letter, to say those things about my success being luck, who does that to their child? Toxic people who don't deserve you." Alyssa replied firmly. Honey, I know they're your parents, but this is emotional abuse. Plain and simple. I didn't respond to the letter. What was there to say? They had made their decision, and the line about no need to respond made it clear they weren't interested in my feelings on the matter. Instead, I threw myself into work with renewed intensity. If they thought my success was luck, I would build something so undeniably impressive that no one could attribute it to good fortune. I worked longer hours, pursued bigger clients, and pushed my team to innovate faster. About 3 weeks after receiving the letter, I was scrolling through social media when I saw a post from a distant cousin mentioning my father's health problems. It was the first I'd heard of any issues. Despite everything, I felt a stab of concern. I considered calling, but remembered the cold regards at the end of my mother's letter and decided against it. A few days later, I ran into Barbara, my mother's friend from college, who had moved to Boston years ago. We occasionally crossed paths at the farmer's market on Sundays. Emma, darling, how are you? I was so sorry to hear about your father's heart condition. Will you be coming to the will reading next week? Martha mentioned they've updated everything recently. I stood there, grocery bag in hand, completely blindsided. Not only had no one told me about Dad's heart condition, but there was apparently a formal will reading schedule that I knew nothing about. I haven't been invited, I said simply. Barbara's expression shifted from friendly to uncomfortable. Oh, I'm sure it's just an oversight. You know how scattered your mother can be with these things. We both knew it wasn't an oversight. The week of the will reading, I found myself unable to sleep, plagued by a mixture of hurt, anger, and confusion. Had I truly been such a disappointment as a daughter that they would exclude me from a family legal proceeding? Was I that easily erased? I finally broke down and called the family home, something I rarely did anymore. Mom answered on the fourth ring. Hayes residence, she said formally. Mom, it's Emma. I heard about Dad's health issues and the will reading. Why didn't anyone tell me? There was a long pause. We didn't want to burden you with our problems. You're always so busy with your little company. Little company, I repeated incredulously. Mom, I employ 27 people now, and I'm never too busy for important family matters. Well, the reading is just a formality, she replied dismissively. As I explained in my letter, everything has been decided. There's really no reason for you to attend. Before I could respond, she added, I need to go now. Julie and Brian are coming over for dinner, and hung up. I stood in my kitchen, phone in hand, feeling as if I'd been slapped. The finality of it stunned me. This wasn't just about money or property. This was my mother telling me in no uncertain terms that I was not considered family anymore. That night, I took a long bath, opened a bottle of expensive wine, and allowed myself to cry until I had no tears left. Then, I did what I had always done when faced with rejection from my family. I made a plan to move forward without them. I called my financial advisor the next day and updated my own will, removing my parents and Julie as potential beneficiaries. I designated several charities and set up a scholarship fund for young women in business. If my family didn't want me, I would create my own legacy. 3 months after the will reading I wasn't invited to, I received a text message from a cousin. Uncle Richard passed last night. Funeral Saturday at First Methodist. Not a call from my mother. Not even a direct message. News of my father's death came through a second-hand text as if I were a distant relative rather than his firstborn child. Grief is complicated when you lose someone who rejected you. Part of me mourned the father I had once adored as a little girl, the man who had taught me to ride a bike and built me a tree. Another part felt the fresh sting of his final rejection, the knowledge that he had died without trying to reconcile. I wasn't even sure if I should attend the funeral. Would my presence be seen as disrespectful? Would it cause a scene that would dishonor his memory? In the end, I decided to go. Whatever had happened between us, he was my father, and I needed that closure. The church was filled with familiar faces when I arrived. Former neighbors, family, friends, relatives I hadn't seen in years. I slipped into a pew near the back, not wanting to intrude on the family seating. A few people nodded in recognition, but most avoided eye contact, clearly aware of the family rift. During the service, I watched my mother and Julie sitting in the front row. Mom sat rigidly, tissues clutched in her hand, but her eyes were dry. Julie sobbed dramatically, leaning against Brian for support. I wondered if her grief was genuine or another performance designed to center attention on herself. Immediately, I felt guilty for the thought. Whatever our issues, losing a parent was painful for anyone. At the reception afterward, I kept to myself, accepting condolences from those brave enough to approach me. I overheard snippets of conversations about the will, about how generous my father had been to Julie, about the family home that would soon belong to her and Brian. I was preparing to leave when Brian cornered me by the coat rack. "I hope you're not here thinking you can contest anything," he said in a low voice. "The will is ironclad." Richard made his wishes very clear. I was stunned by his hostility at a funeral, of all places. "I came to say goodbye to my father," I replied quietly, "nothing more." He scoffed. "Right, the prodigal daughter returns. Just remember, you chose your path a long time ago." I left without saying goodbye to my mother, or Julie. The drive back to Boston was a blur of tears, and talk radio turned up loud to drown out my thoughts. Back at work the following Monday, threw myself into distraction. By coincidence, a major opportunity had emerged. North Star Tech, one of the largest software companies in the country, had expressed interest in acquiring Secure Connect. Their initial approach had come weeks earlier, but I had put off serious discussions during my father's illness. Now, I welcomed the all-consuming nature of acquisition talks. Every day brought meetings with lawyers, financial advisors, and North Star executives. We negotiated terms, valuation, and the future role I might play in the merged company. The process was exhausting but exhilarating, giving me purpose during a time of emotional turmoil. After 2 months of intense negotiations, we reached an agreement. North Star would acquire Secure Connect for $4.7 million. My team would be integrated into their organization with guaranteed positions for at least 2 years, and I would walk away with enough money to never work again if I chose not to. The night after signing the final papers, I sat alone in my condo, a glass of champagne in hand. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt oddly hollow. There was no one from my family to call with the news. No one who had been there from the beginning to celebrate this milestone with me. "To you, Grandma Grace," I whispered, raising my glass to the antique clock on my mantel. "You believed in me when no one else did." With my newfound financial freedom, I decided to make some changes. I bought a beautiful house in an upscale neighborhood. Something with space for a home office and a garden that Grandma Grace would have loved. I hired a designer to help furnish it, creating the warm, welcoming home I had always dreamed of. A month after moving in, I was featured in Boston Business Magazine in an article about successful tech entrepreneurs. The piece mentioned my humble beginnings and the company I had built from scratch. There was no mention of family support because there had been none to mention. 2 days after the magazine hit newsstands, a package arrived at my door with no return address. Inside was a collection of my childhood photos, school certificates, and a few small items I had left behind in Connecticut. There was no note, but I recognized my mother's handwriting on the address label. I interpreted this delivery as my mother's way of saying goodbye, of severing the final threads that connected us. She was returning my past to me, washing her hands of any responsibility for the person I had become. That night, I booked a 3-week trip to Europe. I needed distance, perspective, and time to process both my grief and my success. As the plane took off from Boston Logan Airport, I felt a weight lifting. For the first time in my life, I was completely free of expectations, obligations, and the desperate need for approval that had driven me for so long. The European trip was exactly what I needed. 3 weeks of museums, historic sites, and quiet cafes where no one knew my name or my story. I walked 4 miles through ancient cities, took cooking classes in Tuscany, and spent peaceful afternoons reading in Parisian parks. By the time I returned to Boston, I felt renewed, ready to start the next chapter of my life. My new home welcomed me back, with its spacious rooms and morning light streaming through tall windows. I spent Sunday unpacking and settling back into my routine, planning my week, and enjoying the simple pleasure of sleeping in my own bed again. The doorbell rang around 11:30 that morning. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I assumed it might be a neighbor or perhaps a package delivery. When I opened the door, I froze in shock. My mother stood on my doorstep alongside Julie and Brian. They looked oddly out of place against the backdrop of my elegant new home, like characters who had wandered into the wrong movie set. "Emma," Mom said stiffly, "may we come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside, more out of ingrained politeness than actual desire to have them in my home. They followed me into the living room, their eyes darting around, taking in the high ceilings, designer furniture, and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. "This is quite a place," Brian whistled, his tone somewhere between impressed and resentful. "Business must be good. Would anyone like coffee?" I offered, falling back on hostess manners to mask my discomfort. "No, thank you, dear," Mom replied, perching on the edge of my sofa as if afraid to fully commit to sitting. "We can't stay long." Julie remained standing, arms crossed over her chest, her expression sour. I noticed she looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes. Brian placed a possessive hand on her shoulder. An awkward silence stretched between us until Mom finally spoke. "Your home is lovely, Emma. Very sophisticated. You always did have expensive tastes." The passive-aggressive comment hung in the air. I chose not to respond to the bait. "What brings you to Boston?" I asked directly. "You should have called first." "I might not have been home." "We tried calling," Julie said sharply. "You changed your number." I had, in fact, changed my number. After the funeral, tired of seeing Mom on my caller ID, only to find it was a telemarketer who had spoofed a local number. "Well, you're here now," I said. "What can I do for you?" Mom straightened her back, adopting the formal posture I recognized from childhood discussions about serious matters. "Emma, we're in a difficult position," she began. "After your father's passing, we discovered his financial situation was more complicated than we realized." I waited, saying nothing. "The medical bills were substantial," she continued. "Insurance covered some, but not all. And the house needs significant repairs before it can be sold." Julie jumped in, her voice quivering slightly. "And Brian and I just found out we're having twins. The doctor says it's a high-risk pregnancy. I might have to quit my job earlier than planned." I looked between them, beginning to understand where this conversation was heading, but scarcely believing it. "That sounds challenging," I said carefully. "I'm sorry for your difficulties." Mom leaned forward. "Emma, we've seen the articles about your company sale. We know about the money." The bluntness of her statement took me aback. "My financial situation is my private business." "But that's just it," Brian interjected. "Family finances are family business. You owe your family a share of your fortune." I actually laughed, though there was no humor in it. "I owe you." "How exactly did you reach that conclusion?" "Your success came from the values we instilled in you," Mom said, her tone increasingly righteous. "The work ethic, the education we provided, everything you are comes from us." The audacity was breathtaking. I struggled to maintain my composure. "The education that I earned scholarships for, the work ethic I learned from Grandma Grace, the business I built while you were telling me, it was just a phase." Mom's expression hardened. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a folded document. "We have proof that you promised to support the family financially if you ever made it big. Your father kept notes from our conversations." She handed me a paper with what appeared to be a transcription of a phone call dated during my college years. The handwriting was indeed my father's, but the content was twisted, taking fragments of an optimistic conversation about the future and framing them as a promise of financial support. Julie began to cry right on cue. "We're going to lose the house, Emma, the house you grew up in. How can you be so heartless?" "I don't understand what you're asking for," I said, though I understood perfectly well. "We're asking for what's fair," Brian stated flatly. "A third of your windfall. You're set for life now. The least you can do is make sure your mother and sister are taken care of." I stood up, anger finally breaking through my shock. "Let me get this straight. You disinherit me. Don't invite me to my own father's will reading. Barely acknowledged me at his funeral. And now you show up at my door demanding money. Do I have that right?" "This isn't about the past," Mom sniffed. "This is about family responsibility." "I think you should leave," I said quietly. "Not until we resolve this," Brian insisted. "We're prepared to take legal action if necessary. Your verbal contract with your parents is binding in Connecticut." "Legal action," I repeated incredulously. "You're threatening to sue me." "Not threatening," Mom corrected. "We've already consulted an attorney. Either you agree to share what's rightfully ours, or we'll see you in court." I walked to the door and opened it. "Get out of my house now." They didn't move. "Emma, be reasonable," Julie pleaded. "Think about your nieces or nephews. They're innocent in all this." The manipulation was so transparent it was almost laughable. "Almost." "I'm calling my lawyer," I said, pulling out my phone. "And then I'm calling the police to remove you from my property if you don't leave immediately." Brian stood, pulling Julie up with him. "You'll regret this. Blood is thicker than water." "Apparently not in this family," I replied. As they reluctantly moved toward the door, I dialed Gregory Wilson, my attorney, who had helped with the North Star acquisition. He answered on the second ring, and I put him on speaker. "Gregory, my family is here threatening legal action over my company sale. They're claiming I owe them a third of the proceeds based on an alleged verbal contract." Mom, Julie, and Brian froze in the doorway. "Emma, make no statements and do not agree to anything," Gregory advised, his voice clear and authoritative through the speaker. "This type of claim has no legal merit without substantial documentation. I'll meet you tomorrow to discuss, but, for now, ask them to leave and communicate only through me going forward." The look on their faces as they heard a professional dismiss their claims so easily was something I will never forget. A mixture of shock, anger, and for the first time, fear. "You heard my lawyer," I said. "Please leave now. Any further communication can go through him." They left without another word, but the damage was done. The peace I had found in Europe had been shattered, replaced by a new battle I never wanted to fight. The next morning, I met Gregory at his downtown office. The space was all polished wood and leather, with views of Boston Harbor that typically would have calmed me. Not today. I brought the document my mother had shown me, along with every piece of correspondence I had received from my family over the past 5 years. "This is ridiculous," Gregory said after reviewing everything. "What they're attempting is essentially extortion, dressed up as a family obligation. There's no legal basis for their claim of a verbal contract." "Could they actually sue me?" I asked. "Anyone can file a lawsuit," he explained. "The question is whether it would survive initial scrutiny. Based on what you've shown me, I doubt it would, but we should prepare as if it will proceed just to be safe." 2 days later, we received a formal letter from Thompson and Blackwell, a small law firm in Hartford. The letter outlined their claims in legal language that made my stomach turn. According to them, I had made repeated promises of financial support throughout my adult life, creating a reasonable expectation that I would share my business success with my family. "These people are serious," I said to Gregory during our next meeting. "They're seriously misguided," he replied. "But we need to understand what we're dealing with. I'm going to have an investigator look into your family's financial situation and any history of similar claims." What the investigator uncovered shocked even me. 3 years earlier, my parents had made similar claims against a distant cousin who had won a moderate lottery prize. The case had been settled out of court, but records suggested they had received a 5-figure sum. "They've done this before," I said in disbelief. "They're professional opportunists." But the revelations didn't stop there. I decided to go through some of Grandma Grace's old papers that I had kept in storage. Among them, I found financial records showing that my parents had borrowed substantial sums from her over the years, with little evidence of repayment. Most disturbing was a letter Grandma Grace had written to her attorney before her death, explaining why she had left her estate to me instead of her daughter. In it, she detailed my father's gambling problem, which had drained family resources for years while my mother covered for him. She expressed concern that any money left to my mother would be mismanaged or lost to my father's addiction. "Your grandmother knew," Gregory said gently. "That's why she protected her assets by leaving them directly to you." Armed with this information, we prepared for the preliminary hearing. Gregory gathered statements from my business associates, including Diane, confirming that I had built my company through my own efforts without family support. We collected bank records showing I had never received financial assistance from my parents after high school, and we prepared to present Grandma Grace's documents if necessary. The day of the hearing arrived with a mix of dread and determination. I wore a conservative navy suit and minimal jewelry, wanting to project seriousness rather than the wealthy entrepreneur my family believed I had become. The courthouse was imposing, all marble and echoing hallways. I saw my mother, Julie, and Brian huddled with their attorney near the courtroom entrance. They pointedly looked away when they noticed me. Inside the courtroom, their attorney presented their case first. The claims were even more outlandish than I had expected. According to him, I had promised to take care of the family once my business succeeded. He described elaborate conversations that had never happened, including specific pledges to buy my parents a retirement home and fund Julie's children's education. My mother took the stand, painting a picture of a loving, supportive family who had sacrificed everything for my success. She claimed they had paid for tutors, computers, and business courses that had given me the foundation for my company. It was a work of complete fiction. "We just want what Emma promised us," she said, dabbing at non-existent tears, "what any loving daughter would want to do for her family." When Julie testified, she described financial hardships that seemed designed to elicit maximum sympathy: the dangerous pregnancy, the mortgage they could barely afford, the dream of giving her children the opportunities she had never had. Throughout their testimony, I maintained a neutral expression, though inside I was seething at the blatant lies. When our turn came, Gregory approached the issue methodically. He presented my academic records, showing the scholarships I had earned. He called Diane to testify about my business development, highlighting that I had built everything from a small inheritance from my grandmother, not family support. Then he revealed the financial records showing my parents' history of mismanaging money, the loans from Grandma Grace, and the previous attempt to claim a relative's lottery winnings. "Your Honor," Gregory said, his voice steady and clear, "this case represents a troubling pattern of behavior. The plaintiffs have a documented history of seeking financial gain from successful relatives. They have misrepresented their relationship with my client and fabricated promises that were never made. This lawsuit is not about family obligation. It is about opportunism, pure and simple." The judge, an older woman with shrewd eyes, had been taking notes throughout. She looked at my mother directly. "Mrs. Hayes, these financial records raise serious questions about your credibility. Can you explain why you failed to disclose the previous settlement with your nephew or the loans from your mother that were never repaid?" My mother stammered, clearly unprepared for this line of questioning. Her attorney attempted to object, but the judge overruled him. "Additionally," the judge continued, "I see no evidence of a verbal contract, even if such conversations occurred as you described them, which seems doubtful given the contradicting evidence. They would not constitute a legally binding agreement." She turned to me briefly, her expression softening slightly. "Ms. Hayes, the court recognizes that family relationships can be complex and painful. However, you have no legal obligation to support adult family members who have chosen to exclude you from inheritance and family proceedings." With that, she dismissed the case, stating that it lacked legal merit and appeared to be brought in bad faith. Gregory squeezed my shoulder as we gathered our papers. "It's over," he said quietly. "They can't touch you now." But as I looked across the courtroom, at the fury on my mother's face and the defeated slump of Julie's shoulders, I knew that while the legal battle might be over, the emotional wounds were far from healed. In the courthouse hallway, my mother caught up to me as I was thanking Gregory for his help. She pulled me aside, her face flushed with anger and something else I couldn't quite identify. "You humiliated us in there," she hissed, keeping her voice low. "Was that necessary? Bringing up all that ancient history?" I looked at her, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time, as one adult seeing another rather than a child seeking approval. She seemed smaller, somehow, diminished by the exposure of her schemes. "Why did you really disinherit me, Mom?" I asked quietly. "Was it ever really about Julie needing more help, or was it punishment for not needing you?" Her expression shifted, the anger giving way to something raw and honest. "You were always so independent, even as a little girl. You never needed me like Julie did. Do you know how that feels, to have a child who can take or leave you? And that justified decades of favoritism, of making me feel like I was never good enough." "You were already good enough," she said bitterly. "That was the problem. You didn't need us to succeed. You made us irrelevant." In that moment, I understood something fundamental about my mother that had eluded me my entire life. Her love was conditional, based on need and dependence. Julie's clinginess and constant crisis made her feel important, necessary. My self-reliance threatened her identity as a mother. "I would have included you in my life if you had ever shown genuine interest in who I am, not what I could give you," I told her. She had no response to that. As she turned to leave, Julie approached, her eyes red from crying. Brian had stormed out immediately after the ruling. "You got what you wanted," Julie said, her voice breaking. "You proved you're better than all of us. Happy now," I sighed. "This was never about being better than you, Julie. This was about defending myself against people who tried to take advantage of me after years of rejection." She looked down, avoiding my gaze. "They told me you promised," she whispered. They said you owed us, that you had abandoned the family for your career and needed to make amends, and you believed them without ever asking me. I needed to believe them, she admitted. The twins, the mortgage, time drowning, Emma, and you seemed to have everything figured out. Despite everything, I felt a flicker of compassion for my sister. She had been manipulated just as I had been, albeit in different ways. I can't give you a third of my money, I said firmly, but I could set up college funds for the twins with legal documentation and clear boundaries. Her head snapped up, surprise evident in her expression. Why would you do that after all this? Because they're innocent in all this, and because breaking the cycle starts with someone making a different choice. In the weeks that followed, I worked with Gregory to establish trust funds for my future nieces or nephews, structured in a way that the money could only be used for educational expenses. I made it clear to Julie that this was not an open door to further financial requests, but a one-time gesture for children who deserved a chance. The emotional aftermath of the court case was harder to navigate. I began seeing Dr. Rebecca Winters, a therapist specializing in family trauma. Our weekly sessions helped me process the complicated grief of losing my family not once, but twice. First through their rejection, and then through their betrayal. You're mourning the family you deserved but never had, Dr. Winters explained. During one particularly difficult session. That's a unique kind of grief because there's no closure. No funeral for lost possibilities. Gradually, I built a life filled with people who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. Alyssa remained my rock. I reconnected with Nathan when his job brought him back to Boston. I cultivated friendships with people who understood boundaries and reciprocity, concepts my family had never grasped. I also channeled my experience into helping others. I established the Grace Henderson Foundation for Young Entrepreneurs, providing seed money and mentorship to young women from challenging backgrounds who wanted to start businesses. Our first recipient was a 22-year-old single mother who had developed an innovative childcare scheduling app. Working with these determined young women healed something in me. I saw in them the resilience I had developed, the drive that had carried me through difficult times, and I took pride in being the supporter I had wished for during my own journey. A year after the court case, Julie reached out via email, asking if we could meet. We arranged to have coffee at a neutral location, a quiet cafe halfway between Boston and Hartford. I arrived with clear boundaries and tempered expectations. Julie was already there, looking more settled than the last time I had seen her. The twins, a boy and girl, were now 4 months old and thriving, according to the photos she showed me. Our conversation was cautious, but civil. I've been in therapy myself, she told me, and was beginning to understand the dysfunctional patterns in our family. Mom isn't speaking to me much these days, she admitted. Since I refused to appeal the court decision and accepted your trust fund offer, are you okay financially? I asked, careful not to open a door to requests. We're managing, she said. Brian got a promotion, and I'm working part-time from home. It's not luxury, but it's stable. We didn't become best friends that day, or even particularly close, but we established a fragile beginning, an acknowledgement that while we couldn't change the past, we might be able to create a different kind of future relationship, one based on honesty and respect rather than competition and resentment. As for my mother, our relationship remained distant. She sent a formal thank you note for the trust funds, but made no attempts at reconciliation. I had accepted that some bridges couldn't be rebuilt, and perhaps shouldn't be. That Thanksgiving, I hosted dinner at my home for what I had come to call my chosen family, Alyssa and her husband, Nathan and his new boyfriend, several colleagues who had become friends, and 2 young entrepreneurs from my foundation. The house was filled with laughter, honest conversation, and the warm glow of connections built on mutual respect. After everyone had gone home, I found an envelope that had been delivered with the day's mail. Inside was a short note from Julie. Emma, I'm learning that family isn't just blood, it's behavior. Thank you for showing me what that can look like. Happy Thanksgiving, Julie. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was an acknowledgement, a small step toward healing. That night, I stood in my garden, looking up at the stars that Grandma Grace had taught me to identify as a child. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the pain that had nearly broken me, and the strength I had found in rebuilding myself. I realized that true freedom came not from winning the legal battle, or even from financial success, but from finally releasing the desperate need for approval from people incapable of giving it. My worth had never been dependent on their validation. It had always been within me, waiting to be recognized. If you've ever had to create boundaries with toxic family members, or felt forced to choose between your well-being and family expectations, I hope my story reminds you that you're not alone. Sometimes the family we build is healthier than the one we're born into. Have you ever had to make difficult choices to protect your peace? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe to hear more journeys of healing and self-discovery. Remember, you deserve respect and love without conditions. Thank you for listening to my story. My name is Kimberly, and I just turned 29 last month. I always thought family meant everything, despite our complicated history. That belief shattered when I scrolled through Instagram on a Monday morning and saw my parents and sister smiling in sync. The caption hit like a punch: "Nothing but real family on this journey." Confused and hurt, I called my sister. No answer. Then my bank app notified me. $10,400 withdrawn. Emergency fund emptied. Their Greek vacation was on my dime. Before I continue, where are you watching from today? Hit subscribe if family betrayal stories resonate with you, because mine is about to get wild. Growing up in suburban Michigan, I was raised in what most would consider a typical middle-class family. My parents, Margaret and Thomas, worked hard to provide for my sister, Jessica, and me. Dad was an accountant at a local firm, and Mom taught third grade at the elementary school down the street. We lived in a modest 4-bedroom house with a backyard just big enough for summer barbecues and the occasional birthday party. From an early age, my parents emphasized financial responsibility. Dad would sit us down every month to explain household budgeting, the importance of saving, and how credit cards could be dangerous if misused. "Always have an emergency fund," he would say, "because life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it." The irony of this advice is not lost on me now. I took those lessons seriously. After graduating from Michigan State with a marketing degree, I moved to Chicago and secured a position at a digital marketing agency. For 5 years, I diligently saved 20% of each paycheck, building what I considered a substantial emergency fund. By 29, I had managed to save just over $10,000 for unexpected situations. I lived modestly in a 1-bedroom apartment in Wicker Park, drove a reliable but unflashy Honda Civic, and treated myself occasionally but responsibly. Jessica, on the other hand, followed a different path. 2 years older than me, she always seemed to be the favorite. Where I was practical and cautious, Jessica was spontaneous and charming. She could talk her way into and out of anything. Growing up, if I got a new winter coat, Jessica would somehow end up with a new coat and boots. If I received a B+ on a difficult test, Jessica would be praised for her C, because at least she tried her best. This pattern continued into adulthood. When Jessica dropped out of college to find herself, our parents supported her financially for 3 years while she bounced between jobs and relationships. When I asked for help with student loans during a particularly tight month, Dad lectured me about financial independence. "You chose that expensive school," he reminded me, even though it had been his idea for me to attend Michigan State in the first place. The distance between us grew as we aged. After several failed career attempts, Jessica eventually settled into a real estate position in our hometown, conveniently living in our parents' renovated basement until the market improves. She never seemed to have money for rent, but always had funds for new clothes, weekend trips with friends, and the latest iPhone. Our relationship deteriorated further when I declined to be a bridesmaid in her wedding 3 years ago. The requirement to spend $3,000 on a destination bachelorette party in Miami was simply beyond my budget at the time. "If you really cared about me, you would find a way to make it work," she had said. My parents sided with her, of course. I attended the wedding as a guest, sitting in the back like a distant acquaintance rather than a sister. My mother discovered social media around that time, transforming from someone who barely used a smartphone to an Instagram enthusiast overnight. Her feed became filled with carefully curated family moments that rarely reflected reality. Photos of holiday gatherings captioned, "Blessed with the perfect family," appeared days after heated arguments. Pictures of Mom and Jessica on spontaneous mother-daughter lunch dates materialized when I knew Jessica had only shown up to ask for money. There were warning signs I should have heeded last Christmas. I noticed several unusual charges on my credit card statement. When confronted, Jessica admitted she had borrowed my card to buy presents because she was a little short that month. She promised to pay me back but never did. My parents dismissed it as sister sharing and suggested I stop being so uptight about money. 3 months ago, I discovered my banking password had been changed. The bank confirmed someone had called claiming to be me, but failed the security questions. When I mentioned this to my family, they seemed unconcerned. Dad joked that I was becoming paranoid, while Mom suggested I probably just forgot my password. Despite these red flags, I continued trying to maintain family harmony. I called weekly, visited monthly, and always remembered birthdays and anniversaries. With thoughtful gifts, I genuinely believed that family connections were worth preserving, even through difficulties. I wanted to believe my family loved me as much as I loved them, despite evidence suggesting otherwise. If only I had recognized these small betrayals for what they were. Practice runs for something much bigger. Monday mornings at the marketing agency where I worked usually followed a predictable routine. I would stop for coffee at the corner shop, settle at my desk by 8:30, and spend the first 30 minutes checking emails while organizing my weekly schedule. That particular Monday seemed no different, until my coffee break at 10:15. Scrolling through Instagram while waiting for a new pot to brew in the office kitchen, I stopped cold at a photo posted 3 hours earlier. There, against the unmistakable blue domes and whitewashed buildings of Santorini, stood my parents and sister. Their arms were wrapped around each other, sunglasses perched on smiling faces. The Aegean Sea stretching endlessly behind them. The caption read, "Surprise family vacation finally happening. Nothing but real family on this journey. Making memories that will last forever. #blessed, #family first, #Greece, #SANTORINI. Single quotes. My coffee cup hovered halfway to my lips as I stared at the screen. My first thought was that it must be an old photo, perhaps from some trip I had forgotten about, but the date stamp showed it was posted that morning. The geotag confirmed Santorini, Greece. I zoomed in on the image, noticing new details. My sister wore a sundress I had never seen. My father sported a fresh haircut. My mother had a new designer handbag hanging from her wrist, the one she had been admiring online when we last spoke. Nothing but real family on this journey. The words echoed in my head as my coworker Rachel entered the kitchen. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, placing her hand on my shoulder. "My family is in Greece," I managed, showing her my phone. "They never mentioned a trip, and apparently I'm not real family." Rachel's expression shifted from concern to outrage as she read the caption. "That's messed up, Kim. Have you called them?" I nodded, already dialing Jessica's number. Straight to voicemail. I tried my parents with the same result. Back at my desk, I found more evidence on their social media accounts. Jessica had posted a series of Instagram stories, a business-class airplane cabin with the caption, "The only way to fly to Europe," a 5-star hotel suite with an infinity pool, a sunset sailing excursion around the Greek islands. The knot in my stomach tightened. My family had never taken lavish vacations. We had grown up camping in Michigan state parks and occasionally visiting relatives in neighboring states. A spontaneous trip to Greece seemed wildly out of character and beyond their financial means, unless, with trembling fingers, I logged into my banking app. The homepage loaded, showing my checking and savings accounts. Everything appeared normal until I clicked on my emergency savings account. The balance read $8,746. Just last week, it had contained $10,483.27. I frantically checked my transaction history. Over the past week, there had been multiple withdrawals: $3,200 to Olympic Airlines, $5,400 to Celestial Santorini Resort, $1,795.81 to Aegean Excursions. The room began to spin. I gripped the edge of my desk, trying to process what I was seeing. My family hadn't just gone to Greece without me. They had gone to Greece with my money. "Oh my God," I whispered, loud enough that Tyler from the neighboring cubicle rolled his chair over. "What's wrong?" he asked, genuine concern in his eyes. I could barely form the words. "My family. They stole my emergency fund, over $10,000 for a vacation to Greece that I wasn't invited to." Tyler's expression darkened. "That's not just rude, Kim. That's literally theft. The rest of the workday passed in a blur. I forwarded the transaction details to my personal email, took screenshots of the social media posts, and tried repeatedly to reach my family. No one answered. That evening, curled up on my sofa with Rachel sitting beside me for moral support, I scrolled through more vacation photos that had appeared throughout the day. My mother posing at a lavish restaurant captioned, "Best Mediterranean food ever." My father and sister on a private tour of ancient ruins, all of them together on a yacht, champagne glasses raised in a toast to family adventures. My phone pinged with a notification from my credit card company. Another charge was pending from Athens Luxury Transportation for $850. I feel like I'm going to throw up, I told Rachel, rushing to the bathroom. Kneeling on the cold tile floor, I heaved until nothing remained but bitter tears. How could they do this? How could they steal from me, exclude me, and flaunt it publicly? You need to call the bank, Rachel said firmly when I returned, and possibly the police. The thought of reporting my own family for theft made me physically ill again. But I knew she was right. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was calculated betrayal. The next 2 days were among the most difficult of my life. I fluctuated between paralyzing hurt, simmering rage, and occasional moments of doubt. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe this was some elaborate surprise that would make sense eventually. I left dozens of voicemails and texts from my family members. None were returned. Their social media accounts continued updating with photos of their Greek adventure, each post like salt in an open wound. I spoke with my bank about the unauthorized withdrawals, but hesitated to file an official fraud claim. These are family members. I explained to the representative, I want to give them a chance to explain before I take legal action. The bank placed a temporary hold on further transactions, but informed me that family fraud cases were complicated. Without a police report, recovering the funds might be difficult, especially since the money had already been spent. I barely slept. I picked at my food. I went through the motions at work. Grateful that my current project was in a lull phase, I researched international banking laws and the statute of limitations on financial crimes, still hoping there would be no need for such measures. On Wednesday evening, my phone pinged with a text message from Jessica. My heart leaped, thinking, finally she was responding to my numerous attempts at contact. The message read, "He won't notice. His account's barely active anyway. Dad says, book the extra excursion." It took me a moment to realize Jessica had mistakenly sent me a text intended for my father. She wasn't responding to me at all. She was discussing spending more of my money. My hands shook as I typed back. 3 dots appeared immediately, disappeared, reappeared, then vanished again. No response came. That text message was the confirmation I needed. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a banking error. My family had deliberately accessed my account, stolen my emergency fund, and planned to continue spending my money while excluding me from their real family vacation. I called the bank back immediately, this time speaking with a fraud specialist named Sarah. "I'd like to report fraudulent transactions and freeze my account," I said firmly. "I see the temporary hold from your previous call," Sarah replied. "To process a fraud claim, I'll need some additional information." For the next hour, I detailed every unauthorized transaction, confirmed I had not given anyone permission to use my accounts, and forwarded screenshots of Jessica's damning text message. "Family fraud is unfortunately common," Sarah said compassionately. "But that doesn't make it any less serious. We'll flag these charges as fraudulent and begin the investigation process." "What happens next?" I asked. "The merchants will be notified that the charges are disputed. Their payment processing will be suspended, meaning any pending charges or holds will not go through. Since the transactions were international, this might affect their ability to make additional purchases or check out of their accommodations. A small, vindictive part of me hoped it would ruin the rest of their trip. The larger part just felt hollow. We'll also freeze your accounts to prevent further unauthorized access and issue you new cards and account numbers," Sarah continued. "Do you know how they accessed your accounts? Did you share your passwords or cards?" "No," I said firmly. "But my sister has previously used my credit card without permission for smaller purchases, and 3 months ago, someone tried to change my banking password." Sarah's typing was audible through the phone. "Miss Harris, I'm going to flag this as a priority investigation. I would strongly recommend you consider filing a police report. Family fraud cases are difficult to resolve without one. I thanked her, but remained non-committal about involving law enforcement. Despite everything, the thought of my parents or sister being arrested was still unimaginable. After hanging up, I methodically went through every financial account I had, changing passwords, updating security questions, and enabling two-factor authentication. I removed my saved payment information from every website and canceled automatic payments that weren't essential. I felt simultaneously empowered and devastated. Standing up for myself was necessary, but the circumstances were heartbreaking. I had lost not only my emergency fund but also my trust in the people who were supposed to love me most. As I finally crawled into bed around midnight, I set my phone to Do Not Disturb mode, excluding only Rachel and my boss from the silence. Whatever fallout would come, I would face it after at least attempting to sleep. Little did I know, the storm would break at exactly 6:08 the next morning. The harsh buzz of my phone vibrating against the bedside table jolted me awake. Bleary-eyed, I fumbled for it, momentarily confused by the constant vibration. When my vision finally focused on the screen, I saw what was happening: a barrage of incoming calls, all from family members. Mom, 6:08 a.m., Dad, 6:09 a.m., Jessica, 6:10 a.m., Mom, 6:11 a.m., Dad, 6:12 a.m. The calls continued one after another, creating an uninterrupted buzz that matched the anxiety rising in my chest. By the time I fully processed what was happening, I had 26 missed calls, and the phone was still vibrating. I silenced it and opened my voicemail app. The first message played in my mother's voice, high-pitched and frantic. "Kimberly, what have you done? The hotel is saying our payment was declined. Your father is speaking with the manager now. This is completely unacceptable. Call me immediately." The second voicemail was from my father. His tone was deadly serious. "Kim, whatever game you're playing stops now. You're embarrassing this family at an international establishment. Family matters stay within family. You will call back immediately and fix this situation, or there will be serious consequences." Each one was more desperate or threatening than the last. By the final message, my father had escalated to legal threats. "Your sister has informed us about your vindictive text. Falsely reporting family transactions as fraud is a serious offense. If you don't call us back and rectify this immediately, we'll have no choice but to involve our attorney. Family loyalty clearly means nothing to you." My phone pinged with text notifications. Opening the family group chat, I saw a flurry of messages. "Mom, the cards aren't working. None of them. Dad, they're saying the charges have been flagged as fraudulent. Jessica, she figured it out. Kim's doing this. Dad, Kimberly, fix this now. Mom, we can't check out without paying. They're threatening to call the police." Jessica. I knew giving her access to the new emergency card was a mistake. "Dad, your mother is crying in the hotel lobby. Are you happy now?" "Mom, please, Kimberly, we're stuck here." Interspersed among these were private texts from each of them, ranging from my mother's emotional manipulation, "How could you do this to the people who raised you and gave you everything?" to my sister's vicious attacks, "You've always been jealous of me, but this is a new low, even for you." As I read through them, another notification appeared. Instagram alerts showing that several of their vacation posts had been deleted, including the real family caption that had started it all. My hands trembled as I set the phone down. The physical symptoms of stress manifested immediately: a tightening in my chest, nausea rising in my throat, a pounding headache forming behind my eyes. I hadn't experienced a panic attack since college, but I recognized the signs. Focusing on my breathing, I called Rachel. "They know," I said when she answered, my voice small and shaky. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. She replied without hesitation, "Don't respond to them yet." While waiting for Rachel, I emailed my boss, Michael. "Due to an unexpected family emergency, I need to take a personal day. I've completed the client presentations for tomorrow and will be available by email for urgent matters. I apologize for the short notice." His response came quickly: "Take care of yourself, Kim. The team will cover anything urgent. Let me know if you need more time." The simple kindness in his message brought tears to my eyes. Rachel arrived with breakfast and unwavering support. After hearing the barrage of messages, she was adamant: "You did nothing wrong. They stole from you, excluded you, then got caught. Their crisis is entirely self-created. Throughout the day, the messages continued. My parents' tone gradually shifted from outrage to bargaining. We'll pay you back when we return. It was going to be a surprise. We were planning to bring you a special gift. Jessica made a mistake with the caption, "It wasn't meant to hurt you." My sister's approach remained consistently hostile, alternating between blaming me and minimizing what they'd done. "You're so dramatic. It's just money." As if you were actually going to use that emergency fund anyway. Everyone uses each other's accounts. It's what families do. I forwarded the most threatening messages to my email for documentation, then muted all their conversations. That afternoon, I called Dr. Eleanor, a therapist I had seen briefly after a difficult breakup 2 years prior. "I can see you tomorrow at 2 p.m., she said after I explained the situation. "In the meantime, maintain your boundaries. You're having a normal reaction to an abnormal situation." By evening, my family's tone had changed again. My mother sent a voice message, sobbing about being stranded in a foreign country. My father mentioned having to borrow money from another American family at the hotel. A humiliating experience. Jessica's Instagram showed a post about overcoming unexpected challenges, with a sunset view from what was clearly their hotel. Bethany Rachel stayed over that night, sleeping on my sofa after we ordered takeout and watched mindless comedy shows that temporarily distracted me from the situation before falling into an exhausted sleep. I checked my bank app once more. The fraud investigation was officially underway, and all my accounts showed alerts for unusual activity monitoring. Whatever happened next, there was no going back to the family dynamic we had before. Whether they realized it yet or not, everything had changed. 5 days after discovering the theft, I received a blunt text from my father, landing at O'Hare. 3:15 p.m. tomorrow. Be at the house. By 6 o'clock, we need to talk. The message was not a request, but a command, assuming I would simply appear at their convenience after everything that had happened. After consulting with Rachel and Dr. Eleanor, I decided to take control of the situation. "I'm not coming to the house," I replied. "If you want to talk, we can meet at Rachel's apartment at 7 p.m. I'll text you the address." The response was immediate. "This is a family matter. No outsiders. Rachel stays, or there's no meeting," I insisted. "Those are my terms." After a lengthy delay, fine. 7 p.m., I spent the next 24 hours preparing. I printed bank statements highlighting the unauthorized transactions. I compiled screenshots of their social media posts, including the deleted ones I'd saved. I created a timeline of events, including Jessica's damning text message. Dr. Eleanor helped me prepare emotionally, practicing responses to likely scenarios and reminding me that maintaining boundaries wasn't selfish, but necessary. Rachel cleaned her apartment meticulously, setting up the living room with enough seating for everyone. She placed a pitcher of water and glasses on the coffee table, creating an atmosphere that was neither hostile nor overly welcoming. "Remember," she said as we waited for my family to arrive, "you did nothing wrong. They violated your trust, stole your money, and tried to manipulate you when caught. Stay focused on those facts." At precisely 7:02 p.m., the doorbell rang. Rachel squeezed my hand before going to answer it. I remained seated, consciously controlling my breathing. My family entered as a unit, presenting a unified front. My mother's eyes were puffy from crying, while my father's jaw was set in a rigid line. Jessica hung slightly behind them, her expression a mixture of defiance and apprehension. "Kimberly," my mother said, stepping forward with arms extended. For a hug, I didn't reciprocate. "Please sit down," I said, gesturing to the sofa opposite my chair. Rachel took a seat beside me, nodding politely to my family. "Is this really necessary?" my father asked, glancing at Rachel. "Having an audience for family business. Rachel stays," I repeated firmly. "She's here for support, and because I trust her." The implication that I didn't trust them hung in the air. My family reluctantly sat down, my parents together, on the sofa while Jessica perched on an armchair to their right. "You've put us in a very difficult position," my father began, using his authoritative voice that had intimidated me throughout childhood. "Your actions resulted in us having to borrow money from strangers and rearrange our entire vacation schedule." "My actions," I repeated incredulously. "Let's be clear about what happened. You accessed my accounts without permission, stole over $10,000 from my emergency fund, used it for a family vacation that explicitly excluded me. then became angry when I discovered the theft and protected my finances. It wasn't theft, my mother interjected, tears already forming. We're family. We would have paid you back. When I asked, and why didn't you ask me first? We knew you'd say no, Jessica said, rolling her eyes. You're always so uptight about money. Responsible, I corrected. I'm responsible with money. That's why I had an emergency fund to begin with. My father leaned forward, attempting to take control of the conversation. Look, things got out of hand. We should have discussed it with you first, but falsely reporting fraud has created serious problems. We had to use your mother's retirement account to pay the hotel after your stunt. It wasn't a false report, I said, opening my folder of evidence. Let me walk you through exactly what happened. For the next 15 minutes, I methodically presented the evidence, the unauthorized transactions, the social media posts, Jessica's text message. I explained how they had accessed my account using my old password, which Jessica had apparently memorized during the Christmas borrowing incident. You never change your passwords, Jessica muttered defensively. It's your own fault for making it so easy. Rachel made a small noise of disbelief beside me, but remained silent as promised. Why? I finally asked, looking directly at my mother. Why exclude me and then use my money? For a moment, her facade cracked. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she admitted. The trip was Jessica's idea initially, just for her and us. But then we looked at costs and decided I should fund it without knowing or being invited. I finished. You have plenty of money, Jessica interrupted. You never take vacations or do anything fun. That money was just sitting there while we never get to travel. It was an emergency fund, I said slowly, as if explaining to a child, for emergencies, not for your Greek vacation. We were going to bring you a really nice souvenir. My mother offered weakly. The caption, I said, turning to her. Nothing but real family on this journey. Explain that. My mother flushed. That was unfortunate phrasing. I meant the core family, the three of us who have always been so close while you've been off in Chicago, focusing on your career. The hurt must have shown on my face because Rachel reached over to squeeze my hand again. The truth, my father interjected, is that we've been planning this trip for your mother's birthday for months. Jessica lost her commission on a big sale that was going to fund part of it. We were in a tight spot. So, you decided theft was the solution, I asked. It wasn't theft. All three exclaimed almost simultaneously. Taking money without permission is theft, Rachel said quietly, breaking her silence. Whether it's family or not. My father turned to her, anger flashing in his eyes. This doesn't concern you. It does when Kim shows up at my apartment having a panic attack because her family stole her emergency fund and then blamed her for catching them. Rachel replied calmly. The conversation devolved from there. My mother cried harder, claiming I was choosing an outsider over blood. My father threatened to cut me out of their will if I didn't drop the fraud claim immediately. Jessica alternated between sullen silence and sharp accusations about my privileged lifestyle. Throughout it all, I maintained my position. What they did was wrong, regardless of their justifications. So what now? My father finally demanded. You're going to let this tear the family apart over money. This isn't about money, I said clearly. It's about trust, respect, and boundaries. You violated all three. We're your parents. My mother sobbed. After everything we've done for you. Yes, you raised me, I acknowledged. You taught me about financial responsibility and the importance of emergency funds. Then, you stole mine. The irony was apparently lost on them. Here's what's going to happen, I continued, surprised by my own steadiness. The fraud investigation will continue because that's what this was. Fraud. I've frozen all my accounts and changed all my passwords. Going forward, you will have zero access to my finances. And what about family? My father demanded. That's up to you, I replied honestly. I'm open to rebuilding our relationship eventually, but only with genuine accountability and new boundaries. Boundaries, Jessica scoffed, always so dramatic. My father stood abruptly. Until you drop this fraud nonsense, consider yourself no longer part of this family. We won't be humiliated like this. My mother gasped but didn't contradict him. Jessica smirked slightly. That's your choice, I said, fighting to keep my voice from trembling. I'm sorry you see it that way. You'll regret this, my father warned as they moved toward the door. When you need your family, and we're not there, you'll remember this moment. After they left, the apartment seemed unnaturally quiet. Rachel sat beside me in silence for several minutes before asking, "Are you okay?" I wasn't, not really. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. "I will be," I answered truthfully. "For the first time, I see them clearly. That's worth something." The weeks following the confrontation were simultaneously the most difficult and most transformative of my adult life. The immediate aftermath brought a flurry of hostile messages from my family, ranging from my mother's emotional appeals, "How could you choose money over family?" to my father's cold legal threats and Jessica's vindictive social media posts vaguely referencing toxic family members who show their true colors when challenged. I maintained my distance, responding only to direct questions with brief, factual answers. Dr. Eleanor called this detached engagement and assured me it was healthier than either complete silence or emotional reactions. The banking investigation proceeded slowly. Sarah, my fraud specialist, called regularly with updates. "Family fraud cases are complicated," she explained during our third call. "The good news is, we've recovered about 60% of the funds so far. The remaining amount may require additional steps." Following Dr. Eleanor's advice, I consulted with Jennifer, an attorney specializing in financial crimes. She outlined my legal options clearly. "You have enough evidence for a criminal complaint, but that would likely result in charges against your family members. Alternatively, we could pursue civil action to recover the remaining funds." After careful consideration, I decided against pressing criminal charges, but kept the option of civil action open depending on the bank's final resolution. Work became an unexpected sanctuary. Michael, my boss, proved surprisingly understanding when I finally explained the situation. "Family stuff is complicated," he said. "Take the time you need, but no, there's an opportunity here." He mentioned an upcoming position managing our new client accounts that would include a significant salary increase. "You've demonstrated exceptional judgment under pressure." That's exactly what we need in leadership. The promotion came through 3 weeks later, providing not just professional validation, but also the financial means to begin rebuilding my emergency fund sooner than expected. My social circle transformed during this period. Some acquaintances drifted away, uncomfortable with the messy family drama, or swayed by my mother's increasingly public narrative, painting me as the villain. Others stepped forward in ways I never anticipated. Tyler from work invited me to a financial wellness group that met monthly to discuss investment strategies and savings goals. Paula from my apartment building introduced me to her book club, creating a regular social outlet when I most needed one. Rachel remained steadfast, inviting me to family dinners with her parents, who treated me with a warmth that highlighted what healthy family dynamics could look like. 2 months after the confrontation, I moved to a new apartment in a different neighborhood. The decision was partially financial, but mostly symbolic. A fresh start in a space that carried no memories of tearful phone calls or sleepless nights worrying about family drama. Rachel and Tyler helped me move, turning the potentially melancholy day into something closer to a celebration. New beginnings. Rachel toasted with pizza and beer once we'd assembled my bed frame. 2 boundaries and better days. My mother's social media campaign intensified as major holidays approached. Photos of family gatherings appeared with captions like, "So blessed to have loyal family together this season." And some people choose money over love, but we choose each other always. Mutual acquaintances reported that she openly described me as having abandoned the family over a simple misunderstanding. These public attempts at manipulation stung, but less severely as time passed. Dr. Eleanor helped me recognize the patterns of emotional control that had defined our relationship for years. "Notice how she's still centering herself as the victim," she pointed out during one session. "That's not someone ready to take responsibility or change." The first holiday season alone loomed as a significant hurdle. Thanksgiving had always been at my parents' house, Christmas Eve at Jessica's, and Christmas Day back at the family home. The thought of navigating November and December without these familiar traditions initially felt overwhelming. "Create new traditions," Dr. Eleanor suggested. "Reclaim these days with people who respect your boundaries." Rachel's invitation to join her family for Thanksgiving provided the first opportunity. Her parents welcomed me warmly, making space at their table without interrogating me about the family rift. For the first time in years, I enjoyed a holiday meal without walking on eggshells or moderating my opinions to avoid conflict. Christmas presented a different challenge, one I decided to meet head on. I organized a chosen family gathering at my new apartment, inviting Rachel, Tyler, Paula, and several others who had provided support during the difficult months. We exchanged modest gifts, shared a potluck dinner, and played board games until midnight. It wasn't perfect or polished like my mother's carefully orchestrated Christmas celebrations, but it was genuine and joyful. An unexpected bright spot appeared just before New Year's Eve. A letter arrived from my grandmother, my father's mother, who lived in Arizona and rarely involved herself in family politics. Kimberly, she wrote in her distinctive flowing script, I've heard conflicting stories about what happened this year. Your father and Jessica have their version, but I've known you since you were born. You were always the responsible one, the thoughtful one. Whatever occurred, I trust you had your reasons. My door and heart remain open to you, regardless of what your parents decide. She included a check for $500, with a note, a small contribution to your emergency fund. Everyone deserves security. The gesture brought me to tears, not just for the financial support, but for the validation from someone who had known me my entire life. I called her that evening, and our conversation, while careful to avoid detailed discussion of the rift, re-established a connection I hadn't realized I was missing. 6 months after the confrontation, my financial situation had stabilized. The bank had recovered most of the stolen funds. My promotion included a substantial raise, and my new budget allowed for modest but consistent contributions to a rebuilt emergency fund. Jennifer, my attorney, sent a formal letter to my parents regarding the remaining unrecovered amount, resulting in a cashier's check arriving without accompanying note or acknowledgement. During this period of rebuilding, I met Andrew through a cooking class Tyler had convinced me to join. Initially, I was hesitant to pursue any relationship while still processing family trauma, but Andrew's patience and understanding gradually wore down my reservations. By summer, we were dating steadily. His respect for my boundaries was a constant reminder of what healthy relationships should feel like. My family's a bit complicated right now, I had explained early on. Families usually are, he replied simply. I'm interested in getting to know you, not judging your family situation. 7 months after the Greece incident, Jessica reached out unexpectedly. Her text was brief. Can we talk? Just us. After consulting with Dr. Eleanor, I agreed to meet at a neutral coffee shop. Jessica arrived, looking less polished than usual, her typical confidence somewhat diminished. I've been in therapy, she began without preamble. Turns out I have some issues with entitlement and impulse control. It wasn't quite the apology I had hoped for, but it was something. The Greece thing, she continued awkwardly. I know it was wrong. I justified it at the time, told myself you wouldn't miss the money, and we deserved a nice vacation. Mom and Dad still don't really get why you were so upset, but I do. I crossed a line. Several lines, I corrected gently. She nodded. Yeah, several big ones. Our conversation lasted nearly 2 hours, touching on childhood patterns, parental favoritism, and the competitive dynamic that had defined our relationship. It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was a first step towards something new and potentially healthier. My parents remained distant, occasionally sending formal messages about family business matters, but avoiding any acknowledgement of what had occurred. My mother continued her social media narrative of having been abandoned by her younger daughter, though the posts became less frequent as the months passed. Nearly a year after discovering that Instagram post from Santorini, I sat in Dr. Eleanor's office for what we had decided would be our final regular session. How would you describe your progress? She asked. I considered the question carefully. I'm not who I was a year ago. I'm stronger, more confident in my boundaries. I understand now that family is about respect and trust, not just blood. I've built connections with people who value me for who I am, not what I can provide. And the hurt, she prompted gently. Still there, I admitted. But it's not crippling anymore. It's more like an old injury that aches sometimes, but doesn't prevent me from moving forward. That's an excellent metaphor. She nodded approvingly. Healing doesn't always mean the complete absence of pain. It means the pain no longer controls your life. As I left her office that day, I felt a sense of completion. The emergency fund that had been wiped out was now fully restored. The relationships that had been damaged were either healing or had been replaced with healthier ones. The boundaries that had been violated were now firmly established and maintained. The journey hadn't been easy, but I had emerged from it with something invaluable: the knowledge that I could survive betrayal, stand firm in my truth, and rebuild what had been broken sometimes into something even stronger than before. 1 year after discovering my family's Greek vacation funded by my stolen emergency fund, I stood in my kitchen preparing dinner for Andrew while reflecting on how dramatically my life had changed. The woman I had been 12 months ago would hardly recognize the person I had become through necessity, growth, and painful self-discovery. My emergency fund now exceeded its previous balance, bolstered by my promotion and more disciplined spending habits. More importantly, it was secured with bank protections that would prevent unauthorized access, with alerts for unusual activities sent directly to my phone. My financial literacy had expanded beyond basic savings to include investments, retirement, planning, and insurance coverage that my previous self had perpetually placed on the someday list. My relationship with my family had evolved into something I would have once considered unimaginable but now recognized as necessary. Contact with my parents remained minimal and structured. After several months of silence following my meeting with Jessica, my mother had reached out with a carefully worded invitation to Sunday dinner that conspicuously avoided any mention of past events. "We miss having you at family gatherings," she wrote, as if my absence had been a personal choice, rather than the consequence of their actions. I accepted the invitation, but set clear parameters. We would meet at a restaurant rather than their home. The visit would be limited to 2 hours, and any attempt to manipulate or minimize what had happened would result in my immediate departure. To my surprise, they agreed. That dinner had been awkward but civil, establishing a pattern for our limited interactions going forward. My father remained somewhat distant, uncomfortable with the power shift in our relationship. My mother alternated between treating me with cautious respect and slipping into old patterns of emotional manipulation that I now recognized and deflected. Jessica's progress proved more substantial. Her therapy continued, addressing not just our family dynamics, but her own financial management issues. During a coffee meeting 3 weeks ago, she had finally offered the genuine apology I had been waiting for. "I was jealous," she admitted. "You built this independent life while I stayed stuck in the same patterns. Taking your money was wrong, and the caption was deliberately cruel. I wanted to hurt you because I envied you, and I'm truly sorry." That conversation marked a turning point, opening the possibility of rebuilding something resembling a sisterly relationship. Though one very different from what we had before, my professional life flourished in ways I hadn't anticipated. The promotion Michael offered had led to additional responsibilities and recognition. My ability to maintain boundaries and manage difficult situations translated well to client relationships and team leadership. 3 weeks ago, I had been approached about an even more senior position that would include partial ownership in the agency. "You've proven yourself exceptionally resilient," the company president had remarked. "That's a quality we value tremendously in leadership." Perhaps the most profound change came in my personal relationships. The crisis had revealed which connections in my life were genuine and which were superficial. Some friends had disappeared when the family drama became uncomfortable. Others had stepped forward with unexpected support. Rachel remained my closest friend. Our bond strengthened through shared experience. Tyler had become a valued colleague and friend whose financial group introduced me to a network of like-minded individuals. Andrew and I had recently begun discussing moving in together, a step I approached with both excitement and careful consideration. "I love that you don't rush decisions," he had said when I asked for time to think about it. "Your thoughtfulness is one of the things I admire most about you." My relationship with my grandmother had deepened through regular phone calls and an extended visit to Arizona. At 82, she offered perspective that helped me contextualize my parents' behavior without excusing it. "Your father was raised to believe family loyalty trumps everything, even when it's harmful," she explained during my visit. "It doesn't make what they did right, but understanding patterns can help you break them in your own life." That insight proved invaluable as I worked to define what family meant to me now. The traditional definition that had guided my life had been irreparably altered, replaced by something more nuanced and ultimately healthier. Family as those who respect your boundaries, honor your trust, and support your growth regardless of blood relation. The financial lessons were equally significant. I had learned to recognize warning signs of financial abuse, the small borrowing incidents that tested boundaries, the dismissal of concerns as uptight or selfish, the guilt trips about having resources others wanted to access. I had developed safeguards against future violations and become more vocal about financial boundaries in all relationships. My emergency fund, once simply a practical necessity, now represented something more profound: self-protection, independence, and the wisdom to prepare for life's uncertainties. The painful irony that my parents had taught me to create this fund only to later steal it had evolved into a powerful lesson about walking the difficult line between family connection and self-preservation. As I set the table for dinner with Andrew, I received a text from Jessica. "Found this while cleaning. Thought you might want it." Attached was a photo of us as children, arms around each other at a lake house our family used to visit each summer. Looking at our young, smiling faces, I felt a complex mixture of sadness for what had been lost and cautious hope for what might still be salvaged. I showed Andrew the photo when he arrived, explaining its significance. "Do you think you'll ever fully trust them again?" he asked. "Trust is earned," I replied after considering his question. "I'm open to them earning it back. But I'll never again mistake blind faith for family loyalty." He nodded, understanding the weight behind my words. "That seems healthy to me." Perhaps that was the most important lesson from this painful journey, distinguishing between healthy and unhealthy relationships, between genuine support and manipulation disguised as love. I had learned to value myself enough to establish boundaries, even when doing so caused short-term pain or invited criticism. The emergency fund had been rebuilt, stronger and more secure than before. So too had I been rebuilt, transformed by betrayal into someone more discerning, more resilient, and ultimately more at peace with the understanding that family, like all relationships, must be founded on mutual respect to truly flourish. I share this story not to villainize my family, but to remind anyone watching that you deserve respect, particularly from those closest to you. Financial boundaries are real boundaries. Taking someone's money without permission is theft, even when done by family. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to stand firm when those boundaries are crossed. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members? Share your experience in the comments below. If my story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more about navigating complicated family dynamics and building healthy relationships. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that healing isn't always linear, but it is always possible.